Whilst there are some players who look like natural centre-backs or born centre-forwards, most footballers can play in a couple of different positions and will be shifted around the pitch by their managers. In fact, when planning this 7, it was around the time that I had filled 2 full sides of my notepad that I realised that probably most footballers change positions at some stage in their career, and stick to and flourish in their new role. If anything, it would probably be harder to find 7 players who started out as, say, a youth team player in a certain position and stuck religiously to that one role. Nevertheless, lots of people have requested this video, and here at HITC Sevens, to quote Paul Weller, the public gets what the public wants. From my not-so-short list, I have just picked a random 7 to look into, as it would be impossible to mention them all. So these are not the 7 best, 7 most influential or anything like that. If you want a video like that, I'd recommend my recent upload on 7 footballers who revolutionised their positions. Oh, and there will be some honourable mentions between 1st and 2nd place. Here are 7 footballers who thrive following position changes. Gareth Bale. A good starting point in this 7, Gareth Bale is an example of a footballer whose position change had a sense of inevitability. Bale made his name at Southampton as a left-back, breaking into the first team at the age of 16 and scoring some really impressive free kicks. Following just 45 appearances, Tottenham brought Bale to White Hart Lane for an initial £5 million, potentially rising to £10 million. In his first 2.5 years with Tottenham, Bale was unspectacular. He made just 8 Premier League appearances in his debut campaign and failed to make the left-back spot his own. Spurs actually agreed a deal in principle to let Bale join Nottingham Forest on loan with a view to a permanent, but the player dug his heels in and said he wanted to stay in North London. It was in January 2010 that Harry Redknapp shifted him 20 to 30 yards up the pitch onto the left flank, and Bale really began to flourish. Bale validated that decision in the most emphatic way possible with a hat-trick against Inter Milan in the Champions League. Maicon, who had been among the world's best right-backs for some time, was made to look like a second-rate player by Bale. In 3 full seasons playing further forward at Tottenham, Bale made the PFA Team of the Year 3 times. He later switched from the left flank to the right flank, where he has predominantly played since making his big money move to Real Madrid, and were it not for injuries and continued off-field disputes in the Spanish capital, Bale would be going down as one of the finest footballers of his generation. Glenn Hoddle. Whilst Gareth Bale's position change occurred early in his career and paved the way for his stardom at club and international level, Glenn Hoddle had already experienced the bright lights of stardom when he shifted position on the pitch. And when I say he shifted his position, that is quite accurate, since unlike the other players in this 7, no one dictated to Glenn Hoddle the position he played in, since he was the manager himself at the time. Among the most naturally gifted footballers the English game has ever produced, Hoddle starred for Tottenham for 12 years and Monaco for 4. He criminally only won 53 caps for England, but students of the game, and Arsene Wenger was chief among them, understood the brilliance of Hoddle. He was a magician with the ball at his feet, capable of beating players, scoring goals, and threading the ball through the eye of a needle. Thankfully, one of the people who could understand Hoddle's talents was the man himself. In 1991, Hoddle dropped down into the 2nd division to become player manager at Swindon, where he transitioned from predominantly attacking player into a sweeper. Swindon began playing with wingbacks, and Hoddle provided a masterful link between defence and attack. His vision and range of passing meant he took to the role with ease, and Swindon won promotion, but Hoddle left for Chelsea before playing for the Robins in the Premier League. Sergio Ramos. I clearly wasn't very inventive with the 7 I picked for this video, as Sergio Ramos is the 2nd current Real Madrid player to feature. In fairness, Ramos' position change is quite an interesting one, since it occurred neither right at the start of his career, nor right at the end, and it happened despite him being brilliant in his original position. Ramos started out as an energetic and aggressive right-back who was on a one-way road to greatness, and that drive took him from Sevilla to Real Madrid. In his early years at the Bernabeu, Ramos was forced to play as centre-back and occasionally even in holding midfield due to injuries. When players returned though, Ramos went back to right-back, and he won both the European Championships and the World Cup with Spain, in addition to a La Liga title with Real Madrid, whilst playing as a right-back. It was around the turn of the decade, following an injury to Pepe, that Ramos once again was displaying his versatility and proficiency at centre-back, and by 2012, it had become his new position full-time. When Spain made it a hat-trick of major trophies, Ramos made it a hat-trick of successful final appearances, but played at centre-back for the first time in the Euro 2012 final. He has since established himself as one of the most successful and dominant centre-backs of the modern era, and the timing and success of his position change makes it an interesting one. Ramos was a brilliant right-back, but he became a world-class centre-back. Billy Wright. There's no way I was going to leave Billy Wright out of this 7, partly because his position change was a historically significant one, but more importantly, because it's been far too long since I've last plugged my book. Billy Wright was a very good, if not great footballer, who was the first player from any country to reach 100 international caps. Wright's longevity was facilitated by a position change, moving from half-back to centre-half. Neither of those are familiar positions to the modern viewer, but essentially a half-back was like a holding midfielder who linked defence with attack, meanwhile a centre-half was more akin to a centre-back. In the 1930s and 1940s, the centre-half was actually more akin to a sweeper, as centre-halves looked to anticipate attacks, snuff out the danger, and carry their team forward. Wright's move to centre-half came around the time of the death of the centre-half and the birth of the centre-back. England had failed to replace the departed Neil Franklin, yes, the Neil Franklin, for 5 years following his defection to Colombia, until they came up with the solution of moving Wright from half-back to centre-half. Now, Billy Wright was no Neil Franklin, but he was an intelligent, hard-working player and an excellent leader. He captained England 90 times, which remains a record, but it is a historical inaccuracy that he is remembered solely as a centre-half and not as a half-back, which was actually his main position. Thierry Henry. When one thinks of Thierry Henry, at least during his time with Arsenal, they probably think of his devastating runs down the left flank before coming inside, opening his body up, and elegantly sliding the ball into the corner of the goal. Unless you're this guy, and then you just remember him as the guy whose handball stopped your country from going to the World Cup. Anyhow, Henry's fondness for the left flank was natural for a man who began his career as a left winger, but he had struggled to really impact games from the left at Juventus. Arsene Wenger knew Henry from their time together at Monaco, and he brought the Frenchman to Highbury as a replacement for Nicolas Anelka. Henry was now a striker, there was no two ways about it, and boy did he flourish there. In his debut campaign, having scored just 3 goals the previous season with Juve, Henry bagged 26 at Arsenal. In 8 seasons with the club, Henry scored 226 goals in 369 games, firmly establishing himself as one of the outstanding foreign players to have ever graced the English game. Henry also went on to become France's all-time leading goalscorer, in addition to enjoying successful stints with Barcelona and New York Red Bulls, and he'll now be hoping he can have the kind of impact that Arsene Wenger had on his career on some of his players at Montreal Impact. Cristiano Ronaldo. As I said in the introduction, this video isn't the 7 greatest footballers to have had significant position changes during their careers, but if it had been, Cristiano Ronaldo undoubtedly would still have featured. Ronaldo's shift from a fleet-footed left winger into a dead-eyed centre-forward is a quite remarkable one that isn't talked about nearly enough. Now, Ronaldo's contribution to the totality of the game at club level has actually been decreasing for more than a decade, if one recalls the demands Sir Alex Ferguson put on him at Manchester United. Ronaldo gradually became more and more focused on goals at Real Madrid, with the shackles of tracking back largely taken off him. It perhaps ought to have been obvious then that he was getting ready to become not quite a poacher, but certainly a very single-minded striker. But I'm willing to admit, I wasn't quite sure how Ronaldo would adapt his game into his mid-30s. Now aged 35, Ronaldo has displayed a real intelligence in moving more central, focusing on how he can best impact a game, and maintaining his incredible goal-scoring output. In doing so, he has probably prolonged his career at the highest level by a number of years, and barring any dreadful injuries, he could easily play as a poacher for another 3 or even 4 years. Following a good first season at Juventus, Ronaldo has been outstanding this season, scoring 25 goals in 30 games and putting himself right back in the conversation in terms of the world's best centre-forwards. Honourable mentions. Had I made this 7 in terms of the greatest players who have ever changed positions, I would no doubt have included the likes of Franz Beckenbauer, Paolo Maldini, and Lothar Matthäus. Elsewhere, one could make a case for Lionel Messi, who moved more central under Pep Guardiola to become the most prolific goalscorer on earth, but has often moved back out to the right flank since. Then there are the likes of Javier Mascherano, moving from holding midfield to centre-back, Bastian Schweinsteiger from the wing to central midfield, Vincent Kompany from midfield to centre-back, and Luis Figo, who transitioned beautifully from a world-class wide player at Real Madrid to a magnificent playmaker at Inter Milan. Others who made my shortlist include the likes of Gianluca Zambrotta, Frank Rijkaard, Toni Kroos, Andres Iniesta, and Antonio Valencia. There are, of course, many more I could have named. The list is virtually endless, but there's still time for one more inclusion. Ryan Giggs. There are a number of position changes which have extended players' careers, and there have perhaps been few finer examples of that than in the case of Ryan Giggs. From a very young age, Manchester United knew they had a special player on their hands in the form of Ryan Giggs. Of all the class of 92, which included some serious talent, Giggs was the first to break through, and the One United officials were most confident about making it all the way to the top. A quick and confident left winger with bags of pace and skill, Giggs darted past players, scoring and assisting plenty of goals. He broke into the United team in 1990, aged 17, and didn't hang up his boots until 2014, aged 41. Unsurprisingly, by the time Giggs got into particularly his mid-30s, some of that searing pace had begun to desert him. Instead of just accepting the natural decline that befalls every footballer, Giggs began to alter his game. He first became a more considered and creative wide midfielder before gradually moving centrally. In the middle of the park, Giggs just looked like a natural playmaker, keeping things ticking and spraying the ball about expertly. He was arguably as effective for Manchester United in his later years as he had been when he could beat 5 players and hit 15 goals in a season. So Giggs' seamless transition and the way in which he thrived in his new role seems like an apt way in which to round off this 7. That's it for the 7, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, hit the like button if so, make sure you are subscribed to HITC Sevens, and if you are a recent subscriber wondering what I'm talking about when I say about plugging my book, then that book is England's Greatest Defender, The Untold Story of Neil Franklin, which is available from www.englandsgreatestdefender.com.